The playoffs are just around the corner, and we had the chance to talk to Penguins Vice President Tom McMillian about the business side of hockey. Can you explain now what happens on the business side once the Penguins do make the NHL playoffs?
Well, there's a frenzy because it's it's a second season and you're selling tickets and you're doing everything, but also you can do a few more specific promotions that you always like to do. So the planning stages for that start earlier. I mean, you never take for granted making the playoffs. We've planned sometimes, had to do this planning in years that we didn't make the playoffs. You just have to be ready. We've had some things. This is our 8th straight year, so we've had some things that have been successful in the past. So we can go on the old reliables like the big screen and some other things. But every year we try to change it up a little bit to keep it fresh.
Now, what is the timetable you guys kind of set for yourselves? Like once you kind of have an idea of they're making the playoffs, what's like your deadlines for like each step of the process?
A lot of this is concept stuff, so you don't really have a deadline because you know when the playoffs are going to start. Fortunately, we qualified relatively early this year, so we had a jump. There have been years when I've worked here where we qualified on the last day of the regular season, so those plans are still in place. You just don't know if you're going to use them or not. But obviously, there are some time-sensitive things. We have the large decals going up on the big windows here. They have to be ordered in plenty of time. The street banners have to be ordered. The T-shirts that we're giving out for the first game have to be ordered. So there's a little bit of lead time on those kinds of products that you have to get. And a lot of other things are just kind of more intellectual ideas that you're thinking of, so you don't have as much of a deadline. You come up with many more ideas than you ever use. That's always the best way to do it,
And then with the big board for the Penguins, how much success have you guys seen from that ever since you started doing it?
It's been phenomenal, but it's a lesson. And when I speak at Point Park, I always say this: you never know a great idea is going to be a great idea when you think of it. It starts as an idea. And some work and some don't. And nobody at the beginning said, this is the all-time greatest idea, this is going to work. We didn't, let's try it. And the first couple of nights we did it, we were playing in Ottawa a couple of years, it must have been 5 or 6 years ago, and there weren't all that many people that showed up, but the TV stations showed up. And they did televised reports on it. And that kind of caught people's fancy. And next thing we started getting 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people coming down. And it does build. And we've obviously had some years where we've gone all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. It gets bigger as it goes on. It's not always huge the first game of the first round, but people get used to it and they get to be a part of it. So it's it's sprouted up elsewhere too. We certainly weren't the first to do it, but it really became kind of part of the playoff tradition here.
Now, when you have a team such as the Penguins with all the superstars they have, how much does that work into like the marketing of this team coming for playoff time?
You try to make it fun. I mean, this year we used the phrase "buckle up, baby," which is just something that Phil Bourque, one of our broadcasters, said during a game last year, during an exciting part of the game. It just had that ring to it. So we thought, let's just grab that. It just obviously the excitement's coming. It denotes that, and the NHL's phrase. You also go in the playoffs. You always go along with the league has an overall branding campaign. So the team's branding campaign is tied with the league so that there's consistency throughout the league. You don't want to have 16 completely different branding. So because it's the cup has been the league's phrase for several years, everything kind of builds on that. So even buckle up baby is on the wall along with because it's the cup. So you're always using the kind of the league's branding slogan as part of what you do, but then each market is different. Columbus is in for the first time in a while. We've been out west, LA, San Jose. Everybody, you have to tailor it a little bit to your market, and certainly ours is different now than the first time we made the playoffs in a long time back in 06, 07. When you've been out for a while and the first time you're back in, it's a little different feel, a little different mentality than when you've made it 8 in a row and people almost expect that you're going to go.
And then can you explain some of the prep work that has to go in with the arena? There's the graphics down there, and you mentioned the stuff on the windows. What type of other things have to go on to get
your whole the scoreboard and the video board, everything changes. You have a new open. We usually do 2 opens during the regular season, one at the start of the season and one usually coming around January just to split it up. So the fans see something. We always have a completely unique one. So that staff's been working on that for a while. That'll debut for the first time Wednesday. The little nuts and bolts, as you guys see going on here, just people, the Stanley Cup Playoffs logo shows up on the ice. People often don't think how that happens. These guys come out here and they have their stencils and they paint it. and a lot of those kinds of work. Bunting and signage around the building. You know, you can add, because it's the Cup, buckle up, baby. You'll see those signs around. Again, the street signs right outside the arena in the streets in this area. So there's a lot of ways that you spread out, and some of them are very obvious, and some of them are kind of subtle. But it's all focused on the playoffs, and these are things you're not going to do during the 6-month regular season, because there's now a specific focus to what you're doing.
Now, how much does this help the economy of the Penguins? And I don't know if you guys know this or not, but maybe of like the area of when the Penguins are in the playoffs.
Visitors, I haven't seen this year's numbers. Visit Pittsburgh always does numbers based on what each round does. They calculate how many people come into town. It generates a huge income for the people. Obviously, the hotels and the restaurants and the bars and people who come in. There's a lot of activity downtown on playoff game nights, and obviously they all root for us. Well, they're Penguins fans, but they want to keep those business nights going too. You know, a few of the years we went to the Stanley Cup Finals, this goes on for 2 months. And everything affects it. You saw it, I think, in the businesses around here the year of the NHL lockout when they took a hit. So you can see the downside and the positive. For us, you always want to play those playoff games. You know, you're all we pay to the cap every year. That revenue certainly helps. So it's a big part of your business.
And then what can fans, you mentioned some promotions for fans, what are some things fans can expect to see when they come to the game this year in the playoffs?
Well, we always like to keep a few surprises, so we don't say everything. So though, I mean, I think the outside, the buckle up baby signage, I think is pretty distinctive, and you would only see that in Pittsburgh. So that's a different change. From the time you walk up to the arena, you kind of want people to start feeling playoffs before they get in the doors. So it looks different and feels different than a regular season game.
That was our interview there with Penguins Vice President of Communications, Tom McMillian. After the break, we have the Case of the Week crew, and they're talking hockey as well. We'll see you on the other side of this break.